Okay, thank you for joining. We are going to be starting our Creating a Customized Written Information Security Plan, a WISP, here in just a moment. It's top of the hour, so we're going to give people an opportunity to filter in and get settled before we start this presentation. We're glad you joined us. We'll be coming back in about another 30 to 45 seconds and we'll get the presentation started. Thank you. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, thank you for everyone that attended, that are attending this webinar. This is a highly important topic, and it's also one that's a top of interest for many people in the tax profession. It's creating a customized written information security plan, called otherwise known as a WISP. Today, I do want to take care of a couple of housekeeping items here, just to go over how this will go as far as earning CPE credit. And I'm just going to go through this. I do have to read this off so everyone understands how we will be issuing CPE credit. Wolters Kluwer CCH is registered with NASBA as a sponsor of continuing professional education on the National Registry of CPE sponsors. State boards of accountancy have the final authority on the acceptance of an individual course for CPE credit. Complaints regarding registered sponsors may be submitted to the National Registry of CPE sponsors through its website, www.nasbaregistry.org. Today's webinar is worth a total of 1 CPE. A total of 4 polling questions will be conducted throughout the presentation, and you will need to participate in at least 3 of the 4 to receive CPE credit. I do want to mention about a bit of a change in the way CPE certificates are distributed. All CPE certificates will be uploaded and accessible by all qualifying attendees at www.cchcpelink.com/marketing within 2 to 4 business days of the CCH CPE link receiving the attendance information. Subsequently, Wolters Kluwer CCH will provide directions for accessing the CPE link site via the email used to register for the webinar. If you require assistance with this process, please email us at taana-webinars@wolterskluwer.com. Please note, CPE is not available when viewing the on-demand version of this webinar. So now that we have this out of the way, we're going to go ahead and get started and get into the presentation. Who is sponsoring the presentation? TaxWise Online Tax Preparation Software is one of your sponsors. TaxWise Online is situated as one of the more secure cloud-based platforms for tax preparers looking to expand their business. And then Wolters Kluwer Tax and Accounting, which is our parent company, our parent division. Let's do this. We're going to go ahead and open up with a polling question. We tend to always do this in these webinars. We want to get an idea of who is attending the webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the polling question. And the question is, what best describes your tax business? Do you mainly prepare 1040 returns with common schedules and deductions? Do you prepare both 1040 and business returns? Do you specialize in tax advisory, planning, and audit? Do you operate a service bureau reseller business, or none of the above? So we'll give people a moment to answer these questions, and then I'll share the results, and you can know who is also joining you on this presentation. Okay, thank you for answering. We have quite a few people responding here. And I would say, if you do have your hand raised and you do have a question, we do have a questions box that you can definitely send questions. We do have a couple of people on staff that are just fielding questions specifically. All right, we're going to give another 10 seconds to complete the poll. If you would, if you haven't done it yet, go ahead and complete the poll, and we will go ahead and share the results here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share the results. It looks like the majority of people that we have joining the webinar are people that do a little bit of it all. You know, they do 1040s and they do business returns. That consisted about 66%. 28% are people, individuals that do 1040 returns with the common schedule. So thank you for answering that poll. We will go ahead and move on. So get into the heart of the material here. So today I have the pleasure of introducing Haley Bales. Haley Bales is a marketing communication specialist with Protection Plus. Protection Plus is one of our trusted partners here at Wolters Kluwer Tax and Accounting, and they do a number of services in helping you protect your tax business. We will go into that a bit later, but she is our resident WISP expert. You're also joined by yours truly here, Brandon Sims. I'm a senior marketing manager with Wolters Kluwer Tax and Accounting North America. And so she and I will be presenting the material that we go over today. Our next slide, I want to go over just a brief agenda of what we will be covering. Now, I think the part that really generated a lot of interest for people wanting to attend this presentation is the opportunity to go ahead and get your WISP document completed. It might be something you've been procrastinating on, or maybe you have one and you just need to update it. So that is going to be probably one of the largest segments of the presentation that we do. But we will cover what is a WISP, the purpose of a WISP, what should be included in a WISP, and the repercussions for non-compliance before we jump into the WISP building tool that Haley will guide us through. So that will be covered. So you've heard this quote a number of times. It wasn't just Warren Buffett, I'm sure, but you've heard the quote say, it takes 20 years to build a reputation, and it takes 5 minutes to ruin it. And if you think about that, you'll do things differently. And that was a famous quote from Warren Buffett. And it is also true, even in, especially in today's age that we live in with the risks that are around us. So that is something that I hope is in the back of your mind, that your business is highly important. You do not want to put any risk to it, especially if it's something that's easily preventable. With that said, Haley, I would like for you to lead us through this first part of our agenda on what is a WISP, and then we'll take another polling question.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brandon. Thanks, everybody, for coming and showing up. This is definitely a very important topic, and I love the quote that you shared because it's absolutely true. We have seen, a lot of this going on in our industry. We want everyone to be compliant. You need a WISP to be compliant. And if you are not, a lot of times that will, shut some doors. So that's why this is so important. So let's kind of talk about the basics of what is a WISP if you guys are unsure. So WISP stands for Written Information Security Plan. So what it is it's a living document. So it's something, I like to point that out, that you constantly need to update, be aware of everything that's on your WISP, shift things as your firm shifts and as things change. That's something to be aware of. But really what it is I like to call it your wall of protection. So you're using it to safeguard your client's data and your data and protect you guys from cyber criminal activity or data breaches. It's an outline for policies and procedures, and it's a document that ensures compliance. So it's basically, like I said, a wall of security for you that's specific to your firm, and it is something that you need to keep up with and keep live and keep changing and make sure that you're building that wall of defense so that you can keep data breaches from happening in your firm.
Okay, thank you, Haley. Appreciate that. Very good points made on what is the WISP. It's pretty straightforward. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and we're going to launch our next polling question. Now, this polling question is going to ask questions about your knowledge about the WISP. So I'm going to launch that now. And let's do that. And if you would, if you can participate, this is our second polling question being offered. And I see some answers coming in here. Thank you for responding. Answers coming in fast and furious here, Haley. Well, and quite a few people have the right answer. It's good to say. I'm going to share the answers here in just a moment. We still have about 10 seconds for you to answer this second polling question. If you haven't done so, please respond to the second polling question. Okay, just have a couple of more. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and share the results. Congratulations if you answered all of the above. All three of those points above, outlining client data security measures, FTC rules and regs required, and it provides operational firm benefits. All of the above is correct. So thank you for answering that question. Now let's move on to just to lay the foundation for what the figures were. Now these figures I'm sharing with you right now comes from Forbes Advisor, an August 28th, 2024 stats and figures segment where they listed the latest cybersecurity data figures as of 2023. And data breaches are at an all-time record. The last time we set an all-time record in data breaches was in 2021. We're here in 2024, and the data breaches are up 72%. There are over 343 million victims of cyber attacks in 2023. The percentage of organizations that have reported an email security incident is 94%. That's practically 100. You may be lucky to be the 6% that's not impacted by that, but it's an overwhelming number. Oops, sorry. The median ransomware payment in 2023 is $10,000. So these are all facts and figures, and it could get worse. So with that said, and laying that foundation, Haley, I want you to jump back in, and I want you to discuss the importance of a WISP, and then we'll move down this chain and we'll get to the creation part.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Brandon. Those numbers are staggering, and they continue to, like you said, climb. And it's been very interesting to see because we need to get smarter with what we're doing because the cyber criminals are getting smarter. So let's talk about the importance of a WISP. So the importance, obviously, is we want to safeguard our clients' data. We want to safeguard our data, but also it's a legal requirement. So that's something that not a lot of people are aware of, that it's something that is a legal requirement through the GLBA. So that was the Graham-Leach-Biley Act. So that went through in 1999. But that is something that lays out that you have to have policies and procedures in place to protect your client data. Any financial institution and tax preparers are, in that realm. You also have to be compliant with the FTC rules and regulations. So FTC has its specific rules and regulations as well. They both have safeguard rules, and both of them, have there are definitely things in fees and negative impacts that can come if you're not compliant, which we'll talk a little bit about. But it's very important because you want to be able to implement specific measures for your company. You want to keep your firm safe. You want to keep your client data safe. And you want to make sure that you have a plan in place in case anything, you do end up getting a data breach, like Brandon just showing those statistics, the 94%. If you are the lucky 6% who's never had a data breach or had to experience something like that, unfortunately, I say it's not if, but when. So it's very important to have that wall of protection up and to build it, as strong as you can in order to be able to avoid some of these data breaches. And even if you do get a data breach, it's very important that you're in compliance so that you're not having to deal with some of these very harsh repercussions like large fines or being prosecuted or things like that. So a lot of the repercussions have some teeth behind those. So that's why we want to make sure that you guys have that WISP. So we want to keep you compliant. That's why it's important. And the legalities behind it are very important. And also you have to have WISP to stay in business. So that's also very important. So we're going to talk a little bit about what needs to be in your WISP. These are things that were kind of laid out by the IRS if you guys have read any of the IRS policies. So there was a couple publications. One of them was the 4557, the other one which was the 5708, which kind of gives you these components. But I wanted to break them down for you because they're things that really need to be in your WISP and kind of the top 10 components that we like to tell people about. And the WISP building tool that we built here at Protection Plus gives you the opportunity to go through each one of these points and really think about it for your firm and make sure that you have all of this in place and it was built around the IRS specifications. So one of them is the data classification policy. So that's basically to label data according to its sensitivity. You want to make sure that the correct people have, access to the correct information, and that if people shouldn't have access to certain information in your company, that they do not. I call that access of least privilege, which doesn't mean, anyone is more privileged than anyone else. But for example, make sure in your firm, in your WISP, that you have it labeled out, or you make sure like if you have an intern or someone who is there for a temporary position, make sure that you're labeling data correctly and that you have it in certain spots according to sensitivity, and only the people that should be accessing that data are accessing that data. So the next one is access control measures. So same thing, those kind of go in together. So make sure you're controlling the people who can access the data and instill security steps for those things, like implementing strong passwords, making sure you have things organized correctly. And while I'm saying these things, I know it sounds like a lot, and when we go through kind of the WISP tool, sometimes there's some jargon and things that we don't automatically understand, and that's okay. So I'm going to try to break it down because it can get really overwhelming sometimes. But basically, in these two instances, for 1 and 2, just think about how you have your stuff organized in your systems, and think about your password procedures, who can get into what, who has access to what. And if you don't know, that's something, you want to think about and have for your WISP plan. You also want to have employee training and awareness. So you want to make sure in your WISP that you have a plan set out for how you're going to train your employees and the resources that you may use. So for example, you might want to be training your employees to avoid phishing scams, so you're not, sucked into a data breach. I know multiple firms who have people, they send out fake phishing emails. It's kind of like a fun game, but also if they click on it, you know that you got them. So a lot of people kind of do fun training stuff like that, just to make sure that your staff are aware and knowledgeable and on the lookout for emails that may be coming from criminal activity or from phishing emails. So just kind of lay out how you want to train your employees and make sure everyone's up to date, make sure everybody has a copy of the WISP as well and understands it. Another thing that needs to be a part of your WISP is incident response planning. So I like to call your WISP your wall, but you also have to have a response plan, which you can put in your WISP as well, which is what happens when you do end up having a breach. So, steps for containing that breach, what you're going to do as far as the investigatory process goes. If you have insurance, what kind of insurance you have, what that looks like, what's your plan when a breach like that occurs. Another thing that needs to be in your WISP that's very important is data encryption. So of course, data encryption is, it's a technology used to scramble data so that people, when you're passing data back and forth, or you're, communicating with clients or even sometimes third-party vendors, that if there's anybody there that's trying to intercept that data, that they will not be able to because you're using encryption. So that's very important. If you don't have a data encryption system, this is a good time to think about what technology you might want to implement and make sure you put that in your WISP. We're going to use such and such technology. A WISP sounds kind of like a scary thing, like I said before, but really when it comes to data encryption, just as an example, you can say, we are using this specific technology to encrypt our data. And this is, maybe how often we're changing that, how often we're changing passwords, stuff like that. So another thing is regular assessments and vulnerability scans. That goes along with this being a live document, right? This is not something, when we go through this WISP building tool, that you're only going to do one time. You need to regularly assess, what's going on, what procedures you're using. If you are vulnerable to any type of attack or any weaknesses, or if you need to patch anything in your system, if there are any holes, or vulnerability scan could just be taking stock of how vulnerable maybe your employees are when we were talking about some of those phishing emails. Also, physical security measures. So this is something that people don't think about super often because when we're thinking about a WISP, we're thinking, of course, of cyber attacks, and we're thinking of everything just being localized on your computer. But this is also an opportunity for you to have written down what you're implementing now, what you plan to implement as far as protecting your physical office space. So, for example, we have, we have locked doors, we have codes, we have, ways that people scan in and out. We have procedures for changing those codes, how often you want to change those codes, what kind of locks you have on things. A lot of people still have filing systems, that are physical paper copies. And a lot of the times we have to do those things, especially if we are filing tax returns where we do have paper copies of things, which we know happens a lot, probably more often than we want to have paper in our offices, but we do. So kind of how we're keeping those things safe and what our plans are. And like it says, cameras, things like that, because there's a lot of data breaches that happen actually within your own firm sometimes. So I've seen that a lot with some of our cases, and some of the data breaches that I've worked on are disgruntled employees. I hope you don't have any of those, but if you do, it's good to have security measures for making sure you know what's going on internally, as well as protecting yourself from the external. So the next one would be data retention and disposal policies. So what do you do with data when you are disposing of it? We're keeping these tax returns for 3 years, 4 years. I know a lot of people are keeping them for longer now just because with the increased IRS correspondence and the complexity of that. But how are you disposing of some of this data? How are you retaining it? The data that you're keeping, how are you keeping it safe? When you do dispose of data, how are you making sure that you've wiped something clean? There are quite a few instances where people are maybe getting rid of servers or upgrading their software, their servers, and they're getting rid of servers or selling them. Make sure you're wiping those devices and you have no personal identifiable information from any of your clients or yourself on any of those servers or any of the devices or machinery that you use. That's very important. Saw that happen recently, actually, somebody who got a new server, and luckily they were not a cyber criminal, but when they got that new server, it had belonged to a previous firm. It had all their data on it. They had not wiped it. So you can only imagine what would happen if that person had nefarious intentions when they got that server. So make sure you have a plan for that. What are we doing when we're getting rid of things or we're changing things, and there's information maybe on those machines or in filing cabinets or things like that. Another one is making sure you're monitoring and logging things. So keeping tabs, like we talked about, on who's accessing data, why they're accessing the data. Make sure there's somebody that has, the authority to go in and look at that, and that is in charge of that. That's one thing that we'll look at when we're talking about building your WISP, is that you will designate a certain person for a certain job, and that's important because you want to make sure that we're not all just assuming that other people are keeping tabs on it, that that's someone's specific job. That's one way actually that someone was able to, in one of the cases I worked on, was able to see that there was an internal data breach from a disgruntled employee because they noticed suspicious activity because they were keeping tabs on who was accessing the data in their systems. And, they found someone that was accessing and pulling things onto a USB that shouldn't be in that file. So that's very important to be monitoring and logging information. So number 10 is compliance with FTC safeguard rules, and we talked about the GLBA safeguard rules, and there's also the entire the IRC, Internal Revenue Code, I'm sorry, to ensure your security program is working as it should. So make sure you have that information. Make sure you have written down, this doing X, Y, and Z to make sure that we are being compliant, and just in general, having a WISP is being compliant. But it doesn't hurt to make sure you have specifics in there for the safeguard rules of this is how, these are the policies and procedures, that we're using to safeguard our clients, and they are compliant with the FTC, the GLBA, and the IRC. So these are just 10 basics. These are things that you'll see when we go into the WISP building template, but there are, you can add whatever you want. We always like to say we want you to have a great WISP, but any WISP or a bad WISP is better than no WISP at all. So this is really just a way that you can write down and make sure everyone is on the same page to make sure that you are keeping you and your firm as safe as possible. So those are just some basics, but you will be, able to go through some more detail and some things that are a little bit more in depth as you walk along in the process for building your WISP.
Hey, great information, Haley. Thank you for that. I mean, you can look at these 10 points and it can be a bit overwhelming, which is so great about this session here is that, in the closing of the session, you should have the tools you need to be able to prepare your WISP in a very simple process, maybe no more than 30 minutes. So thank you for that, Haley. A lot of great information there. We're going to move on to our next polling question. This is our third polling question, so let's go ahead and launch it. There we go. Now this question is, what are the implications for data security noncompliance? $100 per unauthorized client data record disclosure, $250, up to $50,000 per violation.
And I might not have said the exact numbers, so we're not going to hold anybody accountable for
yeah, right.
For not having the exact numbers here. I get carried away sometimes with my impassioned stories, but I will make sure that you guys know the right answer, and it will not be held against you that you do not know the right answer.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the act of just answering qualifies you for the CE, so everyone should participate.
Exactly.
So that's the good thing, Haley. Now this fourth one here, suspension or expulsion from the IRS e-file program, that's a biggie. But all of these are major implications for tax pros, and putting a WISP in place, if it's made easy to do, why would you not do it? And so we still have some people voting here, polling here, and we got a few more coming in. Thank you for answering. And then I will share the results here in just a moment. I'm going to give another 10 seconds here. If you have not answered the third polling question, there's a total of 4, and this is the third. If you could go ahead and answer, that would be great. Okay, I'm going to wrap this one up, and it looks like the majority of answers that we received were that fourth one, suspension or expulsion from the IRS e-file program. It's a biggie. But when you look at that, the only one that's wrong in those 4 is the top one, $100 per unauthorized client data record disclosure. And as Haley will soon tell you, she's going to just briefly go over the legal requirements, go over some of the repercussion measures that happen if you're non-compliant before we go into the WISP tool. So thank you for answering those questions, and we're going to go ahead and move on. Haley, if you could take the floor once again and just briefly explain the legal requirements before we go into the repercussion side.
Yeah, for sure. So these are all very similar, especially so there's the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, which came out in, like I said, 1999, which requires financial institutions, including tax preparers, like it says, to safeguard security and confidential information. So if, there are legal implications if you do not adhere to this. The IRS requirements are these 2 publications that I had previously mentioned. These publications are guidelines, and the guidelines give you requirements for what needs to be in your WISP, but in general, the IRS requires you to have a WISP. And then there is, through the FTC, requires financial institutions, very similar, to follow their safeguard rule, which is to implement a WISP and, to have suitable, precautions and safeguards in place. And I will mention as well, it is very important for everybody to understand that there are legal requirements in all 50 states, and all 50 of those legal requirements are different. So while all of these are pretty streamlined, they do have different legal implications from some of the numbers we just looked at. You need to make sure that whatever state you're practicing in, you look and you see what the legal requirements are for your state, because, and we'll look at what some of those implications are just to give you an idea, but they can be very, very different. So you have legal requirements from all three of these institutions and whatever your state, your state authority. And I want to make sure kind of that we hit home that you can be penalized from every single one of these organizations. So, you might have a smaller fine coming from one of the organizations, but that doesn't mean you can't have, a fine also coming from another one. So things can stack up very quickly, which we have seen happen to a lot of tax professionals. So talking about repercussions for noncompliance, not trying to be scary, just trying to give you information. This is why we want everyone to be compliant. So for the Internal Revenue Code, the penalty is can be for unauthorized disclosures up to 1 year imprisonment or fines up to $1,000. And I do want to add that in this situation, of course, if somebody discloses any client information on purpose, that will come with, some criminal charges. But also, if you don't have a WISP in place, that means you are not protecting your client's data. You won't have criminal penalties, but you will have penalties for unauthorized disclosure. So same thing can happen, even though the word criminal sounds scary. You're not, going to be criminalized necessarily, but it is, you would be breaking the law by not having a WISP. Also, there's a civil penalty of $250 per unauthorized disclosure. Obviously, if you don't have a WISP in place, and somebody's information gets out there, it's going to be an unauthorized disclosure, and you can get up to $10,000 per year for that. So if you have some sort of data breach and you didn't have a WISP in place, and they knew that, then depending on how many names or how much, the amount of personal PII got out there, $250 maybe per client name, depending on, the size of the breach. So that's something to keep in mind. So then when we come over to the FTC, their enforcement, I would say, is definitely the harshest, the biggest numbers other than some of the states, which we'll look at. So they can impose fines of up to, and this is this year, $50,120 per violation. So not having a WISP would be at least one violation, of course. That's a big chunk of change for not having a WISP, $50,000. And I do want to add that the inflation for this actual particular enforcement is pretty steep. So in last year, for this will be for 2025, for 2024, it was 43,000. So you can only imagine every year, even if you're not necessarily keeping up with the specific numbers, the FTC enforcement, their penalties are going to get larger and larger and larger. I wouldn't be surprised in the next decade or so if we're looking at more than $100,000. So make sure you're in compliance with the FTC, because that is a big bill that you're going to get if you don't have a WISP. So when it comes to IRS sanctions, so if you do not, have a WISP, if the IRS finds out, and this is something that happens pretty commonly, even if people aren't slapped with these huge fines, is that you can be suspended from e-filing, you can be expelled from e-filing. You can only imagine what that would do to, your tax preparation season if you were suspended for even a month, what that would do between January and April. So you can definitely be sanctioned through the IRS through these different things. So there are a lot of legal implications here. Some are costly, some are jail time, some are not being able to e-file or to work. So these are pretty serious penalties for something like we were talking about that's actually easy to have. That's why, we're providing you with this, because we want to make sure that this doesn't happen to, any of us or the tax professionals out there. So these are the state-specific repercussions. I just wanted to go over the top 5. You can look up all 50. I've looked at them. It's really interesting to see how different they are, but these are the ones that have the biggest implications. So Texas is up to $50,000 per violation, including failure to maintain a WISP. So imagine if you didn't have a WISP and you got hit by the FTC and Texas, if you lived in Texas, that's $100,000. These can stack. So there's really no limit when it comes to the number of violations you can get depending on your client base and your firm size, but it can obviously grow very quickly. Florida is also $50,000 per violation. That's under the Florida Digital Bill of Rights. New York is $5,000 per violation under the New York Shield Act with potential civil penalties depending on the severity of the breach. So you want to make sure you look into your state specific rules again, because per violation means something different in every state, because some states per violation can mean per client, depending on severity of the breach, how many clients' data was compromised. California is 7,500 per violation under the California Consumer Privacy Act, and then Colorado's 20,000 per violation. So everybody, as you can see, this is just 5 states, but every single state has their own rules and their own repercussions. So please, please, please look at that as well, just to know what's going on in your state, and also just to show you how important it is to be able to not only avoid the federal level of repercussion, but also your state levels of repercussions.
Hey, Stacy, great information. Yes or no? Real quick question for you. So I would assume that all the states have their own particular fines. These are just the top 5, and you're saying that if there's an unauthorized breach that involves 3 states, say you just work in 3 states, then you're saying that those 3 states, those penalties would stack up for each state, right?
Correct. Yeah, so
Okay.
there are a lot of tax preparers out there, and I'm sure there's a lot that are here on this webinar today that, you have a home-based state, obviously, that you're living in and preparing taxes in. But if you're preparing taxes for people in multiple states, then, and you don't have a WISP, then yes, you can be penalized for the breach or the violation in every single state that you have filed for or with.
Wow, that can be very intimidating. Thank you for this information. So, what in talking with Haley, I had a conversation with Haley not long ago, and she was just talking about some of the real world case studies. And Haley, if you could give one of how this kind of plays out in
Hmm.
the case of an individual tax pro that is just going about their life, doing their business, trying to do the right thing. Can you give us take about maybe 2 minutes to give us an oversight of that, and then we'll move
Yeah.
on to the demo?
Yeah, definitely. So stories are my favorite, and I think Brandon knows this. Or no, stories are my favorite because I do like real life examples. And I've seen a million things happen in our case department, but one in particular that hopefully we can all maybe relate to or imagine. There was one particular woman who had our audit protection services, our tax resolution services, but she was unfamiliar with WISP response plan. She didn't have cybersecurity, et cetera, and she had a data breach. And it happened from somebody who just stole her EFIN because she didn't have a WISP in place. She didn't have the right safeguards to be able to to be able to protect her client's data. And she was an older woman. She had built the practice from the ground up. She had about 350 clients. She was a really kind woman, really proud of her business and what she'd done. And it was devastating because of that cyber breach, and because she didn't have a WISP or cyber insurance, and she was completely non-compliant. She was unable to pay any of the fees or fines that she, was required to pay to keep her doors open, and she had to shut down her business. And it was one of the most heartbreaking experiences I've had listening to that phone call, because if there's nothing you can do. It's kind of like car insurance. You can't buy the insurance after the car accident. You can't create the WISP after the breach has happened, or after they come looking for it. You can't just pull it out. So that's just one example. I hate to say that there's many, 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 but that one I think in particular, just because we can all kind of relate, I think a lot of us, to building up our own businesses as tax professionals and pulling in our own clients and working really hard and being proud of that work and that clientele and the business and the rapport you've built with your clients. And all of that was shattered for her in 24 hours.
Wow.
So,
Yeah. And Haley and I, when I talk with Haley, there are countless stories that she can list. Too many to go over in this presentation, but it just really brings it home that this truly, no one is really out of the target site of a cyber hacker. So with that said, I'm going to move on to the part of the presentation that likely many of you came for, and we're going to do a soft handoff to Haley where she can share her screen
yes.
and she
Let's
can go
so
over. Let's see.
we'll jump right into this. Let me make sure, and Brandon, you can tell me to make sure that you can see this correctly. All right, are you able to see that? The ERO WISP?
I do, yes. I
Okay,
see it
perfect. Okay,
perfectly. Yes.
just making sure, because I'm looking
Right,
at this
right.
now, so I can't see you. All right, so
Understand.
this is our WISP building tool website. So created by us here at Protection Plus, and we created it and sculpted it around all of the IRS requirements. So we hit every single point when it comes to those publications that the IRS came out with in guidelines in order to build a WISP. So you come to this website. It's very easy. We're going to do kind of a fake little walk through here. But we've just got a little opening page. It tells you here that it's based off of the IRS publication 5708. Gives you a little information that we've already gone over today. So then you'll click Get Started Now. And so it is a step, about 32 steps. It'll probably take you about a half an hour to get through. It's not incredibly complicated or long, but I will say take as much time as you want with it, and you can do it as many times as you want as things change. So first we go through the user agreement and all that information. I'm just going to show you guys a little bit about how this goes, the objective of the WISP. So we're also trying to educate you as you are going through and break things down and explain PII, things like that for you. So make sure that we want to make sure you're understanding everything as we're going along. I know even I have a decent wealth of knowledge when it comes to cybersecurity and WISPs, but it's very informative, and I've learned a lot really kind of going through here. Then what you'll do is you'll put in your firm name. So we're going to pretend my name is Jane Doe because that is the most classic fun thing to do. So not Joe, or it could be Joe.
Hey, Haley, if I could jump in for a moment and
Yeah,
just
sure,
alert
please.
people that as Haley is going through this presentation, we have provided the link that Protection Plus has given us for you to use in creating this WISP. She's going through the walkthrough, but if you go into your chat, you will see the link that you will be able to use. So sorry for the interruption. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. No, thank you for doing that. So you'll put in your information here. You'll put in your approximate number of clients. We're going to say that Jane maybe has 400. Number of employees, let's say it's her and two other people. So, whatever this looks like for you guys. We'll say, the services that you offer that can help you kind of break down, more of what you would need. We'll say we do tax prep. We'll say that we're a certified public, that we're CPA. And then we ask if you have cyber insurance coverage, because that is also something that's very important to have and have information about. So we're going to say that we do not. So that will give us more information on that. Of course, I'm not going to walk you through all 32 steps, but I just want to give you guys a little bit of a taste of what this looks like and how it's going to build it for you. And as you go along and as you answer these questions, what it's doing is it's building a PDF for you that will get sent to you at the end, which is your complete WISP with all the information that you filled out that's firm specific. So again, making sure that we read and understand. If you're interested in learning more about having cyber insurance, I'll say that we are. So the scope of WISP, again, I'm just going to kind of fly through these, and these are things that you will need to read. Okay, this is very important, something that I want to bring to your attention for data security coordinator, public information officer. These are people that are responsible, so the data security is for your firm's, data security processes, how that's implemented, who's supervising, just like we talked about earlier, with who's kind of keeping eyes on this information. Then you'll select a public information officer. So public statement spokesperson approves outward facing communications. So you can choose that. So you can say that's going to be me. And maybe I'm choosing a designated employee to be this person, and I'm going to choose Joe Brown to do that. And let's just say Joe Brown is a CPA at our firm. So try to type as quick as I can. So as this information is going into the system, all of these specifics are going to be built into your PDF. So Now we'll continue on. The IRS recommends the data security, so it'll go through the responsibilities. So then you know the responsibilities that should be implemented by the data security coordinator, but you can choose what they're going to be in charge of. So you'll go through all of those things. We'll just click, one of them. Hopefully the person is going to be in charge of more than just one, but for the sake of moving along. So hopefully this is a good kind of just overview of what you're going to be looking at. Mark all of the following locations where your business has personal identifiable information. So this is a really good time for you to not only go through and create this WISP, but to take stock of things that maybe you haven't sat down and thought about for a long time. And I think that's one of the really valuable things about this WISP building tool is not only at the end are you sent a PDF of a personal WISP for you and for your firm, but this gives you an opportunity to ask yourself some of those questions and to really take stock of what's going on and how you're doing things in your firm. So I would encourage you, to make sure you read through all of this thoroughly. If you don't understand something, please call us or do some research. This is a really good learning opportunity for everybody. So going through that, reducing internal risks. Again, I'm not going to go through all 32 pages here, but hopefully you guys have the general idea of what this is looking like. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. So that is just a general idea. It'll take you through those 32 pages, which will bring you through all of the different IRS steps that are recommended for your WISP. And like I said, really good time for you. If you don't have a lot of time to do it, that's okay. Make sure you take the 30 minutes and do it just to make sure you have it. Because like we say, a bad WISP is better than no WISP. But I really encourage you to, as a firm, if you can, sit down and maybe do this together, depending on how many people are in your firm, maybe you and your partner or whoever it may be. And if you have the time, I encourage you to take the time to make sure that you are building the best WISP possible for your business. And if there's something on there that's asking, do you have this? And you say, I don't know what that is, because that happened to me quite a few times when I was reading it originally and when the IRS publication came out. Uh, be honest with yourself. Do I know what that means? And do some of that research, because knowledge is power. So it's great to have the WISP. We want you to be compliant. We also, want you to, be aware and constantly, be trying to build that wall and have that living document. So you can build as many WISPs as you want. You can go on there and change it as things change. And here Brandon has put the QR code, which is great. So you guys can scan that right now and it will take you straight to erowisp.com, or you can just go to erowisp.com and go through that process. And like I said, when you are done with that process, it will email you a full PDF, and that's your WISP. You'll have a digital copy of it, print it out, keep it in your office, because you want to make sure that you have that right on hand in case anybody comes knocking at your door.
That's great. Haley, thank you so much for that. So she went through a process very quickly, of course, just for the sake of time. But Haley mentions this takes 30 minutes. We put the chat in the chat. We put the link that you would go bookmark it. If you can't do it this afternoon, plan a time where you just carve out 30 minutes to an hour to just take care of this. Put it behind you. Check that off of your to-do list, and then you can have a greater peace of mind. I will say this. Haley, if you don't mind, we're going to move on to our next polling question, but as we go to the next polling question, I want to ask you a couple of questions that are in the questions thread. And while we're launching this next polling question, I will just have you answer a few. So let me just this is our fourth and final polling question. So please answer this. And of course, we will have a Q&A after this, and have some additional information as far as resources for you to use in building your WISP and protecting your business. But before we get to that, we're going to do this polling question. So it's been launched. If you'll go ahead and reply to the area. Now, tax preparation software, you're saying, well, why is that in there? TaxWise Online, the sponsor of this webinar, is a cloud-based, platform for tax preparation. That means that data is not on your computers where it could be most vulnerable. It's guarded and it's in a protected vault where a digital vault where people can't get to it. The other thing too that I want to mention is when you're looking at other areas you might be interested in getting information about, you see protection services for your tax office. Now, what that is in response to is Protection Plus. They handle all types of risks that your business will encounter. They handle IRS correspondence risk or full-blown audits. They can help you. They protect 1040s and business returns. They protect federal and state returns. And they also provide a cyber insurance program, so specifically for EROs. They also do protections for BOI filings if you're in that space too, and E&O insurance. So these are all very important aspects of your business that you should inquire about with Protection Plus. And being a trusted partner with Wolters Kluwer Tax and Accounting, Haley, we really appreciate what your company brings to the table in helping our tax pros, because we love our tax pros and we want to make sure they're protected. So we're going to close this poll out, and we're going to end the poll, and we're going to go to the next slide here, and we are almost wrapped up here. And let's do this. I'm going to move on. And so again, if you missed the screen where she did the WISP demo, I'm providing the QR code again to look to get your WISP. There's the demo link, not the demo link, but the platform link where you would go enter your information to create your own WISP. That's over on the left. On the right, there is a live demo link if you're interested in TaxWise online tax preparation software, which has multiple aspects for data security that are not all on your shoulders. So I would encourage you to look at that. There will be a PDF of this webinar in the handout section that you have. You will get a pre-recording of this webinar, so you can go back and reference this again. So our next part, I told you, Haley, I was going to ask you this question, but I had a lot to cover before we wrap this up. But this is an area where if you do have questions, put them in the Q&A. Haley and other pros from Protection Plus and Wolters Kluwer can answer them. If we can't get to them, we'll do our very best to do it afterwards. But I have a question for you, Haley. Matt is asking this question. He asks, is the incident response plan and breach response plan different documents? What would you say to that question?
Yeah, I actually saw that on the side and I was like, oh, I need to answer this because this is something that is important to know. So an incident response plan and a breach response plan those are the same thing. So that's a response plan, but those are different than a WISP. So how I like to explain it is a WISP is, like I said, your wall of protection. It's what you're doing to try to avoid any, data breaches or anything, any cyber attacks. So that's the wall of defense you're putting up. If you do have a data breach, if something gets through that wall, there's a crack in the wall, again, with that on the rise, it's not if kind of, but when, you need an incident response plan. And you must have, it's a different document. We also, if you do cyber insurance with us, we have one of those as well, and we're actually working on a building tool for that. But that is what is your plan for, in the instance that there is a data breach. A lot of the times, if you do have cyber insurance, that's the biggest, that's people's plan a lot of the time. But you must have your response plan printed and in office, because if you do not, you can be fined $1,000 per client. So not only do you legally have to have a WISP, and I know this course was focused on WISP, I'm glad that Matt asked, you also must have an incident response plan. It has to be printed and in office, or you can really rack up fines there too. So your WISP is your wall to keep the bad guys out. Your incident response plan, or your response plan, is what happens when somebody gets through the wall. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you, Haley. Yeah, good answer. Haley, Christopher asked a question, and this is right in conjunction with the answer you just provided. Is cyber insurance required by the IRS?
So no, cyber insurance is not required by the IRS, but we highly, highly recommend it. I would really encourage everyone to go look at their professional liability insurance because a lot of the times professional tax preparers think that it is a part of their E&O insurance, and often it is not, or if it is, it's a very, very low amount that they are willing to cover when the average data breach is $30,000 to $80,000. So insurance is something that is, in our world here, working with data breaches is something that's a part of a full security, cybersecurity plan. Is you need your WISP, you need cyber insurance, and you need a response plan to completely protect yourself. But as far as legalities go, no, you are not required to have cyber insurance. It is not something you can be penalized for from the IRS.
Okay, and we had another person saying, any suggestions on cybersecurity insurance? I think I know someone, right? Um, let's see. And Haley, that would be an area where Protection Plus is able to help in the cybersecurity insurance area, correct?
Yes, yeah. So we
Okay.
are the only ones who have cyber insurance that is built specifically for EROs.
Okay. Wonderful.
And
I
that's
had
just erocybersecurity.com. So that's pretty easy to find too.
right, yeah. So we have one here for Ethan. He's asking, and how do I control ID and password as is house activities and people? Not sure I understand the question, but
Yeah, I'm sorry.
let's
Could
see.
you read that again? Because I couldn't.
Hold on one
Let's
second. Let
see.
me find another one here.
Control ID and password as in-house activities and people.
Okay, here we go. If you have a virtual office and have employees working from home, do they have to have a copy of the incident response printed?
Yes. So
Good
I
question.
would, yeah, I was going to say yes, I would. There's a lot of interesting gray areas when it comes to remote workers, and it comes to, the different ways that, even you're going to encrypt your data, et cetera. But I would highly encourage, yes, make sure they have a response plan, email it to them, have them printed out. Even though technically they're remote workers and their address is not the address of the business, they cannot legally, if the IRS came to their home, make sure that they had the incident response plan printed in their home. But I would encourage you to, have that available to all of your staff just so that they have it and so that they're aware. And so, if anything, you want your staff to know what the plan is, especially if they are the first ones that encounter the data breach. Something's wrong, something's up. What do we do next? But as far as getting penalized for it not being in someone's home, if they're working from home, it really just needs to be in the physical, the office of the physical address, for the firm. But if you work
Okay.
from home and that's your firm, then yes, if that makes sense. Business
Right,
address,
right.
whatever the business address is.
Okay. Christopher has, I think we have time for one more question here, Haley, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Christopher added on another question here. Is there a way that the preparer is like the one you mentioned in the case study,
hmm
um, could have detected her EFIN being used, stolen by logging into, say, irs.gov or another place to see some sort of activity log to detect unauthorized activity?
Yeah, so it's interesting because the way that we actually caught that, or she actually caught that, it wasn't us, was her software did. So most softwares have some safeguards in place to detect suspicious activity, and they're implementing more and more AI. So because of it was all of these large amounts of money that they were using her EFIN to get returns for, it flagged that. So they were the ones that actually told her. So I would look for your software specific safeguards and kind of what they do and what they're implementing. But most major tax softwares that I have seen are very helpful for flagging that suspicious activity. But other than that, unfortunately, other than keeping a close eye on it yourself and what you're sending out and what you're doing, and making sure that you're keeping things safe, that's why the WISP, exists. There's no foolproof method to keep, you know, people out of your data, unfortunately.
Okay, great. Hey, lots of information. We could probably stay on here another hour with questions,
I
but
know. I
thank
like
you.
answering the questions. It's fun.
Yeah, yeah, it is, and you've done a great job of doing it. So, everyone that posted a question, thank you so much. And we are at time. I would just remind people that there will be a recorded version of this webinar that you sat through today that you can go back to for reference. There are a lot of great resource links in there for Protection Plus, and I've also noted that there's quite a few people that have indicated they wanted information on that, but also for TaxWise Online as well, which is a very, very security protection positive software solution that you can look into if you are looking for a tax preparation software. With that said, I want to wrap it up. Haley, I want to thank you so much for attending and lending your expertise to our audience today. And for those that attended, thank you so much. Take care of your WISP and reach out to us if we can help you in any way at Wolters Kluwer Tax and Accounting. We love tax pros and we're here to support you. So have a great day, everyone, and
Thanks,
we'll
everybody.
get ready for next tax season. Take care.
Yep. Thanks.